You know, it's a strange thing, this tendency we have, especially among the intelligent, to not only hold on to ideas that don't work, but to double down on them when evidence mounts against them. You'd think that intelligence would act as a safeguard against such errors. But quite the opposite can be true. Smart people, precisely because they're smart, can become deeply committed to the structure of their ideas. They build entire systems of thought, internally consistent, logically sound, but sometimes catastrophically wrong, and when those systems start to crack, the ego doesn't step aside. It digs in, it says, no, I couldn't have been wrong, I'm too smart to be wrong. And that, I think, is where the danger lies. So today, I want to explore this paradox. Why do intelligent individuals, academics, professionals, leaders, persist with faulty assumptions, defend flawed models, and sometimes lead entire institutions into failure? The answer lies not just in cognition, but in identity, in fear, and in the chaos we try to avoid at all costs. Smart people often fall prey to cognitive biases, not in spite of their intelligence, but paradoxically because of it. At the core of this lies overconfidence, a deeply rooted tendency to overestimate one's reasoning abilities, insights, and judgments. For highly intelligent individuals, this overconfidence can be even more pronounced because they've been repeatedly rewarded for being right. Over time, they begin to trust their intellect more than the evidence in front of them. This creates a blind spot, a psychological loophole through which faulty ideas can sneak in and become entrenched. When someone with a high IQ or academic background formulates a theory, they usually build it on a solid foundation of logic and analysis. They may spend years refining the idea, defending it, and integrating it into their worldview. The problem is that once a person becomes emotionally and intellectually invested in an idea, it becomes part of their identity. Overconfidence reinforces this bond. The smarter the person, the more they believe in their ability to predict outcomes, anticipate objections, and out-argue their critics. So, when evidence surfaces that contradicts their position, the instinct isn't to revise the idea. It's to rationalize the contradiction, or worse, to discredit the evidence. What makes this even more problematic is that intelligent individuals are better equipped to defend their positions. They can marshal data, craft persuasive arguments, and selectively interpret information in ways that support their pre-existing views. This intellectual agility gives them the tools to outmaneuver critics, not necessarily because their position is stronger, but because they're more skilled at defending it. In essence, intelligence becomes a double-edged sword. It allows for sophisticated reasoning, but also for sophisticated self-deception. Another aspect of this dynamic is the illusion of control. Smart people are more likely to believe they can control outcomes, predict complex systems, or optimize solutions simply by thinking harder or applying more complex reasoning. This belief can lead to stubbornness in the face of failure. Rather than acknowledging that a plan or idea isn't working, they may believe that the failure is due to execution, bad luck, or external interference, not a flaw in the original idea. As a result, they double down, convinced that with just a few adjustments, their theory will prevail. Additionally, overconfidence isn't limited to individual thought processes. It's often reinforced by social feedback. Smart people frequently find themselves in echo chambers, surrounded by others who admire their intellect and defer to their opinions. When you are consistently told you're the smartest person in the room, your sense of infallibility grows. Dissenting voices become easier to dismiss, and criticism becomes easier to rationalize as jealousy, ignorance, or resistance to change. This social reinforcement creates a feedback loop that further fuels overconfidence and blinds them to their mistakes. Moreover, intelligent individuals are trained, especially in academia and professional spheres, to value consistency and coherence. Admitting a fundamental flaw in one's logic or belief system feels like a failure of the mind. This pressure to be intellectually consistent, when combined with overconfidence, leads to a kind of cognitive rigidity. They would rather find increasingly complex justifications for a failing idea than admit they were wrong. In some cases, they will even reframe the criteria for success so that the original idea appears valid under new terms, thus preserving their intellectual self-image. Ultimately, what begins as a reasonable belief in one's own intelligence evolves into an overinflated sense of certainty. This certainty shields them from doubt, inoculates them against humility, and compels them to stick with ideas long past the point where others would have let go. When smart people become deeply attached to their ideas, it's rarely just about the ideas themselves. What often happens is that their thoughts, theories, and beliefs become intertwined with their identity. For intelligent individuals, especially those in academic or intellectual circles, their ideas are not just opinions. They are extensions of who they are. The more effort and time they invest in an idea, the more it becomes a reflection of their intelligence, their values, and even their self-worth. Abandoning a bad idea, then, isn't just admitting a mistake in thinking. It feels like admitting a personal failure, a flaw in their very identity. This identity attachment often begins early in a person's intellectual development. As children or young adults, intelligent people are often praised for their thinking, their insight, and their ability to solve problems. Over time, they internalize the belief that being right is not just a virtue, it's their defining trait. When this mindset is reinforced by years of academic achievement or professional recognition, it becomes extremely difficult to separate the self from the ideas the self has produced. So when those ideas are challenged, it doesn't feel like a normal intellectual disagreement. It feels like an attack on their character. This emotional entanglement creates a powerful form of psychological resistance. When confronted with evidence that undermines their beliefs, highly intelligent people may experience a kind of cognitive dissonance, not just mental discomfort, but a deep threat to their identity. Instead of reevaluating their assumptions, they may double down, becoming more entrenched in their position. This is not because they are inherently stubborn or arrogant, but because letting go of the idea would require a painful reconfiguration of how they see themselves. Furthermore, intelligent individuals often build reputations around their ideas. They write papers, give lectures, publish books, or lead projects based on certain principles. These activities don't just promote ideas, they brand the individual as a thought leader or expert. If the idea is proven wrong, the person risks losing not just credibility, but the very identity they've constructed in public. The social cost of admitting error can feel catastrophic. To avoid that, they often rationalize, reframe, or reinterpret new evidence in a way that keeps their original idea intact, because their status and sense of self depend on it. This phenomenon is compounded in environments that reward certainty and penalize doubt. In many professional and academic settings, changing your mind is seen as a weakness. There is little room for humility or intellectual flexibility. This makes intelligent people more likely to dig in their heels, even when they suspect internally that their idea may be flawed. The cost of backtracking, especially in public, is perceived as greater than the cost of being wrong. As a result, they stick to the idea not because it's the best one, but because it's the safest one to preserve their identity and reputation. In some cases, the idea becomes so central to the person's identity that it takes on a moral dimension. It's no longer just about facts or logic. It becomes about right and wrong, good and evil. Any challenge to the idea is then interpreted as not just incorrect, but morally suspect. The person defending the idea now sees themselves as a defender of truth or justice, making it even harder to back down. This moral framing adds emotional weight and creates an even stronger psychological barrier to change. The deeper the identity attachment, the harder it is to accept criticism or failure. Smart people are used to being the smartest person in the room, and they often receive social validation for their insights. Letting go of a cherished belief threatens that self-image. The risk of feeling like a fraud, an imposter, or a failure can become overwhelming. So instead of facing that discomfort, they cling even more tightly to the idea that got them there, even if it's no longer serving them or anyone else. In many cases, smart people double down on bad ideas not simply because of cognitive or emotional reasons, but because of the social and professional incentives that reward consistency over accuracy. Within most institutions, whether academic, corporate, political, or cultural, there are unspoken rules that promote loyalty to a position once it's been taken. Admitting fault, changing direction, or revising a viewpoint can be interpreted as weakness, indecisiveness, or incompetence. For highly intelligent individuals whose careers and reputations are built on their perceived insight, the stakes are particularly high. So even when new evidence suggests their idea is flawed, they may continue to defend it to preserve their standing in their professional community. In many competitive environments, the appearance of certainty is valued more than actual correctness. Confidence is equated with competence. If a smart person publicly shifts their stance, even for valid reasons, they risk being seen as unreliable or untrustworthy. This creates a powerful incentive to stay the course, even when the course is clearly off track. Institutions reward those who stand firm, who seem resolute, who maintain a consistent line, even if it's the wrong one. The message is clear: better to be consistently wrong than visibly unsure. Furthermore, many intelligent people hold positions of influence: professors, executives, policymakers, or thought leaders. These roles often come with followers, employees, students, or constituents who look to them for guidance. To admit that a core idea or belief was mistaken can create ripple effects. It may cause confusion, shake confidence, or undermine group cohesion. In some cases, there are financial or political consequences to such reversals. Grants, investments, promotions, or political support may be tied to the success of a specific theory, strategy, or ideology. Changing course isn't just difficult, it may be professionally dangerous. The structure of academia and other high-level professions also tends to reinforce the status quo. Once an idea becomes associated with a certain expert, it often becomes part of a broader institutional framework. Books are written, courses are taught, policies are enacted. The intellectual infrastructure is built around that idea. Dismantling it means challenging not only one person's viewpoint, but also the system that has been constructed around it. This creates a kind of inertia where everyone involved has something to lose if the idea is abandoned. As a result, smart people, even if they suspect they are wrong, may feel trapped by the very systems they helped build. Another aspect is the competitive nature of expert communities. There's often a fear that admitting error will open the door for rivals to discredit them. Smart people, particularly in public-facing roles, are aware that any sign of weakness can be exploited. Doubling down can therefore be a defensive maneuver, a way of protecting one's intellectual territory from attack. This defensive posture is not necessarily malicious. It may stem from a desire to avoid embarrassment, preserve legacy, or maintain influence. But regardless of the motive, the result is the same: a reluctance to revise or reject a flawed idea. Social media and modern public discourse further amplify this tendency. The Internet rewards certainty, provocation, and boldness, not nuance or humility. Intelligent people with a platform often find that bold, unwavering positions generate more engagement and support. Admitting doubt or error risks losing followers, reputation, and momentum. In such an environment, it's not surprising that even smart people would choose to double down rather than reverse course. These professional and social incentives make it rational, at least in the short term, to hold onto bad ideas. The smarter the person, the better they are at navigating these systems and playing by their rules. But over time, these incentives do more than just shape behavior. They shape belief. And that's when the line between strategic stubbornness and genuine self-deception begins to blur. Confirmation bias plays a central role in why smart people cling to bad ideas, often doubling down even when evidence clearly contradicts their position. This bias, the tendency to favor information that supports existing beliefs and dismiss or minimize that which challenges them, operates subtly and powerfully. For intelligent individuals, the problem is compounded because they are especially skilled at finding patterns, interpreting data, and constructing persuasive arguments. This means they are not just subject to confirmation bias, they are better at using their intellect to justify it. Highly intelligent people are often confident in their analytical abilities, and that confidence leads them to seek information that reinforces what they already think is true. Instead of viewing new evidence with open-minded curiosity, they instinctively search for ways it can be folded into their existing worldview. They may frame counterarguments as exceptions, anomalies, or misunderstandings. This selective interpretation reinforces their original idea and gives the illusion of objectivity, even as they move further away from an accurate understanding of reality. One of the environments that intensifies this problem is the echo chamber. Smart people, especially those in high-status or specialized fields, often surround themselves with like-minded individuals, colleagues, peers, or followers who share similar views or benefit from the same belief system. In such environments, dissent is rare and often discouraged subtly or overtly. Feedback loops form where everyone agrees, reinforces one another's opinions, and collectively filters out disconfirming information. These echo chambers create a sense of intellectual consensus that can be dangerously misleading, making the smart individual feel not only justified, but validated in doubling down on a flawed idea. The digital age has amplified this effect. Algorithms on social media, news platforms, and even academic publication networks prioritize content that aligns with the user's previous interests and beliefs. This means that smart people who spend time online are likely to be shown more of what they already agree with, narrowing their exposure to alternative perspectives. Because they perceive themselves as well informed, they often mistake volume of information for diversity of thought. They feel confident that they've considered all the angles, when in fact they've mostly encountered variations of the same idea. Another factor is the emotional comfort provided by confirmation bias. Intelligent people are often under immense pressure to be right, to succeed, to innovate, to lead. Admitting error can be psychologically distressing, especially when it threatens their self-concept or professional status. Confirmation bias acts as a protective mechanism, allowing them to maintain a sense of control and confidence. By focusing on supportive evidence and dismissing contradictory data, they preserve their sense of intellectual integrity, even when they are moving in the wrong direction. It's also important to note that smart individuals often engage in motivated reasoning. They don't just seek out evidence, they build arguments. When confronted with opposition, they use their cognitive abilities to deconstruct the opposing view rather than to genuinely evaluate it. This adversarial mindset transforms the pursuit of truth into a debate to be won, where the goal shifts from understanding to defending a position. The more skilled they are at debate, the more they convince themselves that their position must be right, because they can out-argue their critics. In many cases, this bias is not conscious or malicious. Intelligent people genuinely believe they are being rigorous, fair, and open-minded, but their analytical skills can make their confirmation bias more sophisticated, allowing them to create elaborate justifications for weak or failing ideas. Over time, these justifications pile up, creating an illusion of robustness. The bad idea becomes wrapped in layers of intellectual armor, difficult to penetrate even with strong counter-evidence. And the smarter the person, the more convincing the illusion becomes, not only to others, but to themselves. Fear plays a powerful, often hidden role in why smart people cling to bad ideas. Specifically, it is the fear of uncertainty and chaos that can cause even the most intelligent individuals to resist change, reject disconfirming evidence, and double down on ideas that no longer hold up under scrutiny. For people whose intelligence has become part of their identity and currency, the unknown represents more than just a lack of answers. It threatens to unravel the very framework they've built their lives around. Smart people are often drawn to structure. They thrive on understanding how systems work, whether those systems are intellectual, scientific, social, or personal. Their ideas are often well-reasoned, coherent, and methodical. Letting go of a flawed idea, then, is not simply a matter of switching one opinion for another. It means allowing for the possibility that the world is less orderly, less predictable, and less controllable than they believe. That realization can be deeply unsettling when faced with chaos, the unpredictable, the ambiguous, the unresolved. They may respond not with openness, but with entrenchment. They hold on more tightly to their existing beliefs because those beliefs offer psychological safety. The need for order and meaning is especially strong among intelligent individuals because their intellect often serves as a defense mechanism against the messiness of life. They use reasoning to make sense of the world, to predict outcomes, and to maintain a sense of control. If that reasoning turns out to be flawed, it can feel like the entire structure they rely on is collapsing. Rather than confront that collapse, they may retreat further into the faulty system, reinforcing it with new justifications, theories, or narratives that protect them from the discomfort of not knowing. This is not merely theoretical, it has emotional weight. Abandoning a belief can be painful, especially if it has been central to someone's world, you for years or even decades. Smart people often feel they should be able to figure things out. When they can't, or when reality contradicts their conclusions, the resulting cognitive dissonance creates anxiety and shame. These emotions are not easily managed, especially by those who are more comfortable in the realm of logic than emotion. Rather than sitting with that discomfort, they may subconsciously double down, not because they are confident, but because they are afraid. Fear of judgment also plays a role. Smart individuals are often seen as leaders, experts, or authorities. Admitting they were wrong might not only shake their own sense of self, it might also impact how they are perceived by others. This external pressure to maintain composure and authority can make uncertainty feel dangerous. They may fear being discredited, losing status, or appearing weak. To avoid that risk, they stick with the familiar even if it is failing. Moreover, the social structures surrounding smart people often don't make room for vulnerability. Academic and professional environments frequently reward certainty and punish ambiguity. There is little space to admit "I don't know" without it being seen as incompetence. As a result, fear of uncertainty becomes fear of professional consequences. The cost of changing one's mind is perceived as too high, so they remain anchored to the idea, regardless of its validity. Finally, there's the existential dimension. For many smart individuals, their ideas form a world view, a lens through which they understand everything from politics to morality to personal relationships. Abandoning a core idea can feel like pulling a thread that might unravel everything. The fear of that unraveling, of entering into an unknown intellectual and emotional space, is enough to keep them clinging to what they know. And so, even when confronted with overwhelming evidence, they may respond not with change, but with conviction, driven not by arrogance, but by fear of what lies beyond. One of the most subtle yet powerful reasons smart people double down on bad ideas is their ability to use their intellectual sophistication as a tool for rationalization. This means that instead of using their intelligence to seek truth, they use it to defend and justify their existing belief, even when those beliefs are misguided or outright wrong. What makes this dynamic particularly insidious is that it often doesn't feel like rationalization to the person doing it. To them, it feels like clarity, like deep reasoning, but in reality, it's a misuse of cognitive resources, brilliance being weaponized against growth. Intelligent individuals are exceptionally good at constructing narratives. They can take incomplete or contradictory data and weave it into a coherent story. They can identify complex patterns and make them sound convincing, even if the foundation is shaky. This means that when their ideas are challenged, they don't need to ignore the evidence entirely. Instead, they reinterpret it, reframing it in ways that support their original position. They may say things like, "that data doesn't apply in this specific context," or "this apparent failure is actually a long-term strategic move." These explanations may sound plausible, even sophisticated, but they serve the function of preserving the idea rather than testing its validity. This intellectual agility can also mask logical fallacies. Smart people know how to argue well. They know how to shift the burden of proof, how to appeal to authority, how to redirect criticism, and how to focus on smaller flaws in opposing arguments to avoid addressing the larger issue in their own. Because they are skilled communicators, they can win debates even when they are wrong, convincing both themselves and others of the soundness of their position. Over time, this can create a kind of intellectual echo chamber within their own mind, where every objection is met with a well-reasoned defense and no idea is allowed to truly be questioned. In many cases, they also overvalue complexity. Simple explanations or solutions are often seen as naive or lacking depth, so smart people may gravitate toward more elaborate models that confirm their own intellectual identity. When their ideas are challenged, they respond by adding layers of nuance, contingency, or theoretical framing, rather than reconsidering the core premise. Complexity becomes a shield, making the idea harder to criticize and easier to defend, not because it's more accurate, but because it's harder to penetrate. This tendency is further amplified by academic or professional environments that reward novelty and sophistication. In such settings, admitting that a simple idea might be more effective than a complex one can feel like regression. Smart individuals may fear being seen as reductive or simplistic, so they double down on their original frameworks, refining them, expanding them, but never abandoning them. They believe that if they can just explain it better, add one more variable, or extend the timeline, the idea will eventually be vindicated. The danger in all of this is that sophistication can become indistinguishable from truth. A bad idea, when dressed up in elegant reasoning, can look like a good one. The person defending it may genuinely believe they are engaging in high-level thinking, when in fact they are rationalizing a position they are too invested in to question. This self-deception is hard to detect, especially because it mimics the process of intellectual rigor. It feels like analysis, it feels like thoughtfulness, but it's driven by a need to protect the ego, not uncover the truth. Ultimately, intelligence used in this way becomes less a tool for discovery and more a mechanism for entrenchment. The smarter the person, the more elaborate and persuasive the rationalizations become. And because these justifications are wrapped in complexity and delivered with confidence, they are not only harder for others to challenge, they become almost impossible for the individual to see through themselves.